I think there's a crisis in democracy now, worldwide, and manifested particularly, in the, among other places in the United States. So, would you agree to that?
Yeah. Yes, I would agree to that.
Okay, and so then the interesting question is, when did the crisis begin?
I'm teaching a graduate seminar called Is Liberal Democracy in Crisis?
Right.
And 2 weeks ago, we actually read some stuff by Nadia Urbanati and Guillermo O'Donnell and some other people, basically writing about the relationship between democracy and crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And, and considering the argument that, at least in one sense, democracy is almost coterminous with crisis,
mm-hmm.
Understood as the ongoing possibility of challenge, or an ongoing contest that never ends. But that's not what you mean. What we mean when we talk about democracy being in crisis.
There's always a kind of a buzz of crisis that, because it's a creative enterprise that responds to the problems that the population faces, and there's never certainty that the response is going to be adequate. And usually it's not. But it's also not. The life of the polity is not at stake. So,
right.
So you and Urbanati and O'Donnell et al. Kind of know that it's kind of characteristic of democracy that there's there's an edge to it. But this may not last, and there may be a real crisis. And my sense is that in the United States, through most of my life, I never, even though I knew that I was a kind of serious critic of American democracy, I never had a sense that there could be something like what existed in kind of Central European dictatorships of the left and the right in the United States. I'm not so sure any longer. So I think I think we both share that sense. And the question is, like, when did that start?
Yeah, I think that, in a way that started when our relationship really started, which is the ascendancy of Trump.
Right.
And
the candidacy of Trump.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
And obviously, Trump in many ways was a symptom, and emerged in a situation in which different features of U.S. democracy had eroded over the course of time, both politically and in terms of the political economic settlement, after World War II. So, Trump is not responsible for this,
right?
But he was a particularly malignant symptom. And then he became a cause insofar as he became president, and was able to much more fundamentally, I don't think I'm mixing metaphors, infect the body politic, poison. And, in some ways, and there's some people on the left who sometimes said, well, he's done us a favor by exposing, some of the injustices or the limits. And it's true. It's true. When you rip everything away, it's a kind of exposure. It can also be very brutal. And, the way in which we reveal ourselves, I think, probably requires a little bit of subtlety in life and in politics. So, he is a big part of the crisis. And I think the way in which the election unfolded exemplifies that. At the same time,
which election are you talking about now?
The 2020 election.
Uh-huh.
His effort to refuse to leave, his refusal to leave office, the assault on the Capitol on January 6th, the coming to the surface in the months leading up to the election and then after it, of all of the worst tendencies of American society and politics that had not surfaced to such an extent. Mm-hmm. And I mean, even the good people on both sides. I mean, Charlottesville was a terrible thing, and it was kind of a precursor. But when Charlottesville happened, it first of all, it didn't happen in Washington, D.C., associated with a national election. It didn't happen as an assault on the Congress. And, you know, and there was still some distance, and it wasn't real, between Trump and that. But by November, there was no distance.
Right.
And since that time, the party, clearly the Republican Party, has more or less solidified, I think, its connection to Trump. I mean, that's something we can talk more about. The other side of this, though, I think, is that there's also COVID. You can't bracket that out of everything that transpired in the past year, and you can't. That took on a symbolic political importance in insane ways. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that the wearing of masks becomes an act of like Antifa, whatever. Yeah. But also, it created an economic crisis, and it exacerbated a sense of the utter failure of government to deliver for people. And I think set the stage actually for Biden's election.